I am Vincent. I'm the Secretary General of the Social Enterprise Summit. So basically, if you have any complaints, it all goes to me. So don't try to turn this into a complaint session yet, okay? I will be here until 5:30 this afternoon, okay? But feel free to give me any suggestions. So far, we got all the good comments so far because of the speakers. So we have speakers from 13 countries this year, so it's really good. It's really good. And just give you some background information. Besides being the Secretary General of the Social Enterprise Summit, I'm also one of the directors of a co-working space in Hong Kong called the Good Lab. The Good Lab is the only social entrepreneur working space in Hong Kong. 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, when the Good Lab started, there are basically only 3 co-working spaces in Hong Kong. Now, after 3.5 years, there are 41 co-working spaces here in Hong Kong. And the other 40 basically are all IT related or design related. So co-working space in Hong Kong and the rest of Asia has been booming, particularly in Taiwan, in Korea, not only Seoul, but also the other secondary tier cities in Korea as well. Without further ado, can I ask you to put a really big hand for our 2 speakers? From Scotland, we have Ms. Karen McGregor, from CEO of Firstport UK. Karen, she will talk about not only her venture, but also background about what the Scotland government has been doing to promote social enterprises. We have probably heard too many London cases from London, but Scotland is completely different, right? And then we also have Mr. Bosun Tijani. Is it Tijani? Yes, thank you. From Nigeria, our African speaker. Possibly the farthest away. You're from the country farthest away from Hong Kong so far. 8 years. All right. All right. And again, feel free to sit in the front. We can feel your energy if you sit in the front. There's a statistics by Stanford 2 years ago. People who sit in the front normally got higher GPA in Stanford. So it's statistically more relevant if you sit in the front and you can get more out of it, all right? So, so without further ado, Karen, I leave the stage to you. Thank you, Karen.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. And a nice picture in the background. People in Scotland like to paint their faces. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you for this opportunity to take part in the Hong Kong Social Enterprise Symposium. It's a real pleasure to be here today. It was my first time in Hong Kong, but I don't think it will be my last. I think I'll definitely be visiting again. My name is Karen, and I'm the CEO of Firstport. And Vincent asked me along here today to share the Scottish story. So I'd like to begin with an overview of Scotland and the development of social enterprise in Scotland. And then I'll share with you some of the stories from the Firstport experience and also some of the people that we've had the pleasure of working with. So, Scotland has an historic reputation for innovation and enterprise. And I don't know, have any of you ever met anyone from Scotland before? Yeah? I bet you within 5 minutes they told you we'd invented this, we'd invented that, so pretty much Scotland thinks it invented the modern world. So in the background here, you see a very famous Scotsman, Alexander Graham Bell, and he invented the telephone. But there were some other innovations around things like tarmac, penicillin, steam engine, and even radar. And more recently, I'm not going to claim we invented the gaming industry, but we did produce one of the world's biggest games, Grand Theft Auto, which has now become a global phenomenon. I don't know if I should say this, but I've never actually played Grand Theft Auto, so I'm not sure how good it is. So, part of this long history of innovations has been business models that don't just look at money. The very first documented example of the world's first cooperative actually dates back to Scotland in 1769. And indeed, the Scottish-born economist Adam Smith said himself in The Wealth of Nations, "No society can surely be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable." So let's fast forward to modern Scotland. And we have seen in the last 10 years an incredibly supportive framework from the Scottish Government for social enterprise. Now, in policy terms, social enterprise is located within the Communities Directorate and is referred to as third sector. But what's strong about the government's approach is that we're now hearing them increasingly make talk about social enterprise in mainstream business, because they believe that you can create a more equal and fairer society at the same time as promoting economic competitiveness. In legislative terms, we've seen the Community Empowerment Act, and this attempts to transfer assets from government back to communities. And we've also seen the introduction of community benefit clauses in public procurement contracts. So this is designed to build in provisions, for example, like ensuring that the winner of the contract provides training, for local young people. Now, direct support for social enterprise started back in 2007. And this all came about with a long-term strategy and action plan called the Enterprising Third Sector. This is a framework that set out a wide range of measures and created an ecosystem for social enterprise to flourish. And since then, the Scottish Government has probably spent around 74 million UK pounds since that time on things like setting up new grant funds and loan funds. They've also put in place a national free business support contract, leadership development, and the opening of public sector markets to social enterprises. And here in the background, we see commitment at the absolute highest level. I think in your last session in this room, you had one of your government officials. Well, this is maybe our equivalent. This is Scotland's Deputy First Minister. And he's working hard in a social enterprise that employs homeless people making sandwiches. We couldn't have a more supportive person, I think, in charge of social enterprise policy. So the political context in Scotland has increasingly shifted towards a new economy where economic growth, as I mentioned before, goes hand in hand with the promotion of fairness and equality. However, there is still a clear distinction in Scotland between a social enterprise and a business that does good. And we heard yesterday, I think, in the opening remarks and speeches, there's still lots of debates over definitions. I'm going to skip that part. I'm just going to give you my definition. So, this year in Scotland, we carried out the very first social enterprise census. And this has given us the most comprehensive picture of social enterprise in Scotland to date. So, despite its deep roots, social enterprise is on the whole a relatively new and fast-growing sector. Scotland has a population of just over 5 million people, and we now know that we have one social enterprise for every 1,000 people. So that I think compared to the Hong Kong stats is slightly more. Yeah? 10 times more. That's easy to remember because the currency is 10 times more here. It's interesting to note though that 42% of the social enterprises formed in the last decade. And I think that was the result of a very supportive period of public policy. So I think the government helped lay that framework, but then communities really took control of that and took action for themselves. We can now say with confidence that social enterprise is really contributing to the economy in Scotland. We know that the sector commands a net worth of 3.86 billion and employs 112,000 people, supporting over 60,000 volunteering opportunities. And when you look at the broad national picture, we see social enterprises have the strongest presence in community amenities, arts and creative industries, childcare, and health and social care, which I picked up yesterday seems to be a big area in Hong Kong too. And we're also walking the walk. We're leading the way in social enterprise in terms of achieving a more fairer and equal society. We know that gender imbalance is not just a basic issue of equality, but it is a well-recognised business constraint. Businesses do better when we have a much more diverse workforce. Social enterprise in Scotland is embracing this. More than half of social enterprises, have more than half of women leading them in terms of who's on boards. And 3 out of every 5 social enterprises are being led by a woman. If we compare that with the FTSE 100 companies, it stands in stark contrast. In the private sector, only 24% of board directorships are held by women, and only 9% of executive directorships are held by women. And when we look at wages, we see a real effort to pay a fair wage to all. Just over 2/3 of social enterprises are paying the national living wage, and we also see a much flatter and equal pay structure across these organisations. So that now brings me on to Firstport, the organisation that I run. One of the most important things we recognised in Scotland was the need to stimulate and nurture a new pipeline of social entrepreneurs. So what we do is we start with the individual person. Back in 2006, we persuaded the Scottish Government that social entrepreneurship had to form part of their wider social enterprise strategy. And we presented them with a proposition that included setting up a specific fund for individuals and also a specific business support service. The Scottish Government was fully supportive, and Firstport formed itself as a charity. And since then, social entrepreneurship has played a key part in the government's social enterprise policy. So, at Firstport, we like to think of ourselves as the go-to agency for all social entrepreneurs in Scotland. We provide people with seed funding, advice and training, practical tools, and access to mentoring. And more recently, we have established locally based co-working spaces in places where we want to stimulate more activity. And we also created an accelerator because we recognise the need that we have lots of social enterprises in Scotland, but they stay quite small. So what we need to do is help them to flourish and grow and scale to increase their impacts. So here's the difference that Firstport's made. We've supported more than 4,000 people, investing just over £3.2 million. Every week we help establish 2 new social enterprises. Those who continue on their journey and set up a company, on average, are creating 2.7 full-time jobs and are generating around £56,000 within 2 years. But the really encouraging thing for me is when we looked at the survival rates. It's easy to start up a business, but it's more difficult to keep it going. But we now know that 3 out of every 5 startups that we support are still trading after 5 years. So sharing, collaborating, co-working and networking have all been vital to our agenda. So I'd now like to share the story of this, the individual people that we're working with, and some of the lessons that we've learned. And I think I'm going to highlight this through some individual entrepreneurs, because I think sometimes we concentrate too much on the mechanisms and the support. You have to see that in the context of the people that are actually out doing the hard work and running the enterprises. So hopefully you'll enjoy some of their stories. So firstly, we wanted more people from more diverse backgrounds and more places to start up social enterprises. And the main way that we do this is by running the Social Entrepreneurs Fund. This is a Scotland-wide fund, and it is the bedrock of what we do. People can apply for up to £5,000 to test out an idea, or they can apply for up to £25,000 if they have proven their concept works. We've supported hundreds of people through the Social Entrepreneurs Fund, from community bakeries in our rural villages to childcare in our cities. So let me tell you the story of someone that we've supported. Injirani set up Networks for Learning to refurbish technology and build computer networks. At the heart of his business was his desire to simultaneously address issues of unemployment in Glasgow and issues of unemployment in sub-Saharan Africa. He also wanted to reduce technological waste. So what Injirani does is he trains young people from low-income households in Glasgow to refurbish the technology, and then he sells this to schools and universities in Kenya who cannot afford or access it. So we helped him get started by providing him with free business support and seed funding, and he used the seed funding to build a website, his marketing materials, and also it helped pay for his salary for a year. So Injirani is just one of the stories of the people that we've supported through the fund, and we've been learning lots of lessons because we've been running this for a number of years. So let me share some of those with you. So here are my top tips. Money combined with support will achieve much better outcomes. Once you award the seed funding, work on the person's personal development plan. This will help build confidence, act as a critical friend, and help them to set goals. Help people to share and connect. If anyone's had any experience of setting up a business, you'll know that it's lonely. So one of the things that we do is we bring people together from all over Scotland at central venues so that they can work together and they can share experiences. And finally, don't forget to celebrate success. We use our own communications and marketing expertise to help tell each entrepreneur's story locally and nationally. So this is helping them achieve recognition, but it's also helping the wider public understand about what social enterprise is. So, as well as running an open national programme, we also want to drill deeper down into our communities, because we want social enterprise to help our towns, villages and cities to be great places to work, live, learn and create. So let me tell you about Beyond the Finish Line. This was a dynamic programme that we delivered in 2014 in my hometown, Glasgow. Why 2014 and why Glasgow? Well, that was easy. The 2014 Commonwealth Games were coming and the city was buzzing, there was real excitement, and I really wanted social entrepreneurs to be part of that legacy. So thanks to a grant from the Big Lottery Fund, we launched Beyond the Finish Line in January 2014 and set about inspiring a group of young social entrepreneurs. We wanted them to set up new social enterprises in the run-up to the 2014 Games. We took on a short-term lease on a vacant property in Glasgow, and within 1 week we transformed this into a flexible city centre co-working space. And you see a picture in the background that, that tells you that. I wish now I'd put the before picture up, because you would then realise how hard we had to work to get it to look like this. So many of the young people that we were working with, they were from the creative industries. They were incredibly inspiring. So I'm just going to briefly just tell you some of the ideas that we worked with. So, for example, we helped a couple of young girls develop an enterprise where they took old pieces of furniture and upcycled them and taught people how to turn them into something new. We also worked with young illustrators who created these amazing window displays around the city, you know, in empty shops, in galleries, in restaurants. And we even had an aquaponics system mounted onto a bicycle, which was to teach people and inspire them about urban food production. So again, we learned a lot from this programme, but here's some of the key points I'd like to share with you today. The first one is have a hook that everyone can understand and identify with. It will make your publicity so much easier. It will create momentum and enthusiasm, and it might even unlock funding. For us, it was the Commonwealth Games, and something that felt events-based, time and now worked really well. Run an exciting campaign to find people, because they won't just come to you. Make it feel like a prize to gain a place, but that will also give them confidence. And put effort into making your space look and feel good, but don't spend a lot of money on it. Beg, borrow and negotiate absolutely everything. So the last example, I'm going to take some water, is our accelerator. And the reason we did this is we believe that if social enterprise is really going to tackle the deep-rooted social issues, then we need to start up social enterprises that can achieve more impact through more ambitious entrepreneurs and high-growth ideas reaching the market. And this is why we are delivering LaunchMe, our social enterprise accelerator. LaunchMe was on a mission to find the most ambitious early-stage social enterprises, and our aim is to help these enterprises raise repayable loan finance from traditional private sector business investors. We selected 14 enterprises and designed a rigorous programme of business support. It included advice, it included accountancy support, peer-to-peer learning workshops, and we also matched them with industry mentors. Now, the crucial point about LaunchMe is we also had access to another grant funding pot. So when an enterprise raised money from the investor, the repayable investment, they could come and ask Firstport for a grant to match that. So let me tell you about Bruce Gunn, one of the people that we've supported. Now, Bruce's life changed overnight when an allergic reaction to a mosquito bite led him to a long-term illness, which left him housebound for 3 years. Bruce felt he joined a lost generation of disabled people unable to find employment. And then one day he noticed a disabled person delivering a parcel, and he had the light bulb moment, and he thought, maybe I could set up a courier company that employs disabled people, and that's exactly what he's done. So Bruce now employs 19 people. He wants to expand into every town in Scotland, and the great thing about his business is it works for disabled people because it gives them the flexibility around the hours that they can work. Bruce is probably one of the most charismatic people I've had the pleasure of working with. It was no surprise to me that he was selected to be part of LaunchMe, and he has now gone on and successfully raised £70,000 from individual private investors as loans, and we have also matched that with a £70,000 grant. So that has given Bruce £140,000 to grow his business. So here are some of the lessons from LaunchMe. So you don't always have to have a physical space to promote co-working. LaunchMe is a national accelerator across Scotland, and it shows that virtual co-working can be really effective too. So we bring the entrepreneurs together who all have different businesses but are all on the same journey, and they can share their experiences at theme sessions. The second, probably one of the most important lessons, is about this combination of loan funding and grant funding. It was working really well because it means that the enterprise has access to more investors to pull in money because grant funding is under a lot of pressure. However, with the grant funding, it means they're not taking on too much debt because these are early stage businesses and they need to be given the room to grow. And finally, build a network. Firstport had no connections, none whatsoever, to the private business investor networks. So the first thing that we did was we built our own network. We went out and found 2 people with great connections and who were willing to share those connections to help us in our journey. So that's our story and some of the ways that we are helping to grow social entrepreneurship in Scotland. Thank you once again for the opportunity to take part. And I'd like to leave you with a favourite quote of mine. Never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Karen. We will hold Q&A later. And now we have Bosun sharing with us driving social change in Nigeria. Bosun. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. You know, when I was coming here, I wasn't really sure what to expect. But working in social innovation, I think something that has been really clear to me in the last 2 to 3 years is that the field is not necessarily growing as fast as one would expect it to grow. Especially in a continent where I come from, which is Africa. Most people tend to think social innovation is just a new way of describing civil society, which is non-governmental organization. So there's been serious struggle. I think Vincent also alluded to it when you said Good Lab is the only co-working space that is focused on social innovation. But I think coming here, I'm actually getting a lot from being part of this. And I think Karen as well, most of the things you've shared, as you're going to see in my presentation, actually sort of resonates with the work we do and also how we go about it. Your last quote as well is spot on, in my opinion. I think the world is moved to a stage where the way we do things, the technologies that we consume today, is sort of pushing more and more of us to be enlightened, to have access to information. And as a result of that, you find that more people are now interested in being part of shaping their society, which means you have more active citizens than passive citizens. And I think that can only be useful for any society. But the challenge is, how do you harness that resources and energy for social good? And I think that's what social entrepreneurship and social innovation is all about. So my name again is Bosun Tijani from Nigeria. I founded 5 years ago an organization, a social innovation center called Co-Creation Hub. Simply out of the interest and belief that I'm originally from a country with so many issues. I'm going to share some of these issues. And I believe that these issues are not necessarily there because that's the destiny of the country. I think the issues are there because historically people have not had the opportunity to have a go at trying to solve their own problem. And I believe we're at a stage now where more and more people, if empowered, can actually push their society forward. And that's why we started CCL. But just an introduction to Nigeria. How many people here know anything about Nigeria? If you know something about Nigeria, can I see you? I'm sure everybody in there. Well, the interesting thing about Nigeria is you probably know some good things and a lot of bad things about Nigeria. But that's the most populous black nation on earth. So there's a statistics that I can't really back up that says 1 out of every 10 black people you meet is a Nigerian. I can't back that up, but there's that statistics. But the population is about 183 million people, just to give you an idea of how big it is as a country and how complex it is as well, which is why you probably hear about some of these good and bad things as well, because that's really a big and diverse country. If you want to put it in context, look at the population of Ethiopia, which is also quite popular. That's just 94 million people, and Ethiopia is also a big country in Africa. South Africa, which is quite popular as well, is just about 52 million. Ghana, which is quite close to Nigeria, is about 25 million. And Gambia is just about 1.8 million. So put that in context and you begin to get an idea of how complex Nigeria is as a country. The land mass is said to be about close to 1 million square kilometers as well, so it's also big in terms of land. The official language is English, even though we also have the bad English, which we call Pidgin, that is unique to Nigeria, just as for those who know Jamaica, it's also quite close to the way they twist the English there to have patra. Another complex thing about the country is that even though it's just one country, you actually have over 500 indigenous languages within the country. So people speak in really like languages that I don't even understand. So I think I can only grab about 2 of these 521 languages. So it's a very, very complex country. In terms of sports, we like football. So probably every Nigerian can play football. I'm very good at football, by the way. And our biggest natural resource is oil and gas. So it's a very rich country as well. It's really, really rich. Of course, mismanaged, of course. Entrepreneurship, on the other hand, is also quite big. So the average Nigerian person is quite entrepreneurial. There's different way to explain that. Entrepreneurial in what sense? Value creation or looking for money. And women as well are actually more entrepreneurial in Nigeria than men, as you can see from the statistics. But these are some of the things you know. So that's in Nigeria, big opportunity. But in 2015, it's still a country with serious issues around healthcare. Huge unemployment, job insecurity, corruption is big, very, very big. Bad roads, poor policy, injustice, everything you can think of. The good things are there, but you can also think of all these things. Yeah. So that's something to bear in mind. And for us, we see this as an opportunity to kickstart and build a great nation. This is not saying we have all these issues and this is our portion in life and we're going to be stuck with it. Which is why for us, starting the Co-Creation Hub was an exciting challenge, because as young people, we thought, these are so many things for us to battle with. Why don't we start an organization that is going to focus on this? As against just building businesses that will be looking at making so much money. Yeah? Then the other bit, digital. So digital is another reality that we all live with in this age. Most of us carry mobile phones everywhere we go. And it's not different in Africa as well. It's changing. Yeah? So you have the population, again, just to remind you, over 180 million people in Nigeria. Active internet users is already at about 70 million. active internet users. It's already at about 70 million. Social media accounts, still small, about 13.6 million people. But the exciting part is the mobile connection. So Africa has moved away from, when internet access came to the West, it came via dial-ups and via people having a desktop computer in their homes. But when internet came to Africa, it came on mobile. So you have a lot of people with smartphones or phones that are somewhat connected in a way, carrying these mobile phones around. And that presents immense opportunity in our opinion. There are challenges around it as well. People ask you questions. People living in the rural area, do they have same access to these things? But if you put it in context and you look at how many people have access to mobile phones, as compared to when it was only land phones, which was something that was only for the middle and upper income class, there's immense opportunity for us to drive change by looking at the mobile phone. We have to talk about that. So this is what led us to CC Hub. So we thought there's something going on in the country, so many problems, young population, but at the same time, technology is beginning to get into the nook and cranny of the country. People are beginning to gain access to the mobile phone. People are beginning to gain access to connected mobile phones as well. So how can we leverage all these opportunities to try and build a better nation? So in 2010, a friend of mine and we decided we were both in the UK, working full-time. I was working in a consulting firm. And he was working for the foremost social innovation center in London called Young Foundation. So we decided to go back to Nigeria, set up the organization which is called the Co-Creation Hub. And we thought it was going to be a social innovation center. Our focus was going to be on looking for ways to find smart people within the society who wants to apply their expertise and skills to solve problems. But most importantly, leverage the growing technology platform which is in the country, which is mobile phone. It became the first innovation hub. I think we were quite fortunate when we started. People, the likes of Google came to our rescue. Nokia then also came to our rescue. It took a bit of time, about 6 months, for us to get it going. But after 6 months, support came from everywhere you can think of. So we had a lot of cash to play with in terms of trying to set up something. So it was a bit easy, I'll say that. It wasn't as difficult as we thought it was going to be. Because, I left my job, I invested all the money I had into it. But after 6 months, it then became really easy for us to get things going. And I think these organizations as well could see that if you support an entity like this, and we're able to begin to inspire, which is another thing about social innovation that I think a lot of people misunderstand. And when we try to measure the success as well, it's not always about the hard result, the hard facts, or the result that comes out of this project at times. It's about the inspiration that you give to people, that they have the ability to begin to think of how their society would be in future. Which is the same thinking they use in technology. So if you're used to the way they do things in the Silicon Valley, where someone starts a Facebook and investors put so much money behind it, and the ordinary thinking businessman cannot figure out how a Facebook would make money. That's the same thinking that we apply to social innovation, in the sense that when people try to change their society in a way, enable them, push them forward, let them try. It's all about experimentation. In the process of experimenting, you will learn something that will then lead to the change you want to see. And if you don't allow people to try, you will never stumble upon some of this knowledge. And that's the way we do our work. So we have an interesting methodology, and this is our co-creation, and also the whole idea of co-working space came into our work. So we decided to form what we call the community. So for us, it was important to start first with the community as against space, because the thinking is clear that you may have a co-working space, but if you don't have the right community to work from within the co-working space, you're still not going to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. So it's not about the space, but the people. So our community is quite vibrant. We have so many software developers in our community. That's actually the base of our community, because the thinking was we'll use technology in any smart way possible in everything we do. Of course, we have people from universities as well within our community. We have public agencies as well, because it's important for those guys to be part of what we do. Even though we focus on experimentation at the beginning, for you to be able to scale some of these ideas, within the social space, you need to work with governments and public agencies. So they're an important part of what we do. And of course, as I mentioned, the likes of Google funded us, Nokia, Microsoft, so technology companies as well, from beginning were part of the thinking. And it was simple. We just thought we want to create a place where we can facilitate creative thinking. You know, at the least, that's what we wanted to create. And again, if you understand the challenges in a society like where I come from, you begin to understand that even encouraging people to think creatively is success. Because people have been used to a situation whereby they sit back, expect the government to do things for them, expect civil society organizations to do things for them. Empowering them to be able to think about how they want to see their society is success. So we thought that was going to be the base of what we'll do. We also saw that technology was already becoming a major part of the world we live in. Whether Africa is there yet or not is not a question. The question is that we can't be successful without using technology smartly. So we thought technology was going to be the core of the work we do in the space. We also said it's going to be a mini living lab, and the concept of living lab for us is that we want our community to be the kind of community where when you create a solution, you can easily test that solution from within the community before you even take it out to real society and begin to get the idea of what you want to see. But also engage the people that will end up using your solution so that they can help you test at the really early stage. And you can engage them in the process of building the solution. And I think lastly, we thought it was going to be important for us also to build skills, help people build skills that they will need to be successful. So if we come across a social entrepreneur, someone who is doing something really good, and maybe that's their first time of ever thinking of building a business, you may need to find ways to help them build the right skills to sustain their business. So that was an essential part of our community as well. And lastly, we wanted to create a serendipity machine, a place where people connect, where people share, where people talk, and we believe that it's in that process of people engaging one another that things will actually happen beyond what you can imagine. So we've been doing this for, like I said, for about 5 years. 2 years ago, we decided to start an incubation center within the space, where when we come across someone doing something really good, we not only give them an office space, so aside from the co-working space, we have another floor which is dedicated to businesses building social ventures. But we also then invest money into them. So we started that 2 years ago, where we were putting between $10,000 to $25,000 into businesses. And this has been so successful that this year, in about 3 weeks' time, we're launching another fund, which is going to be $5 million, and that would invest up to $150,000 into businesses. So we expect that some of the businesses that we've invested in at this stage will then be able to attract more funding, and from there be able to scale their ventures. We also then leverage the incubation center to also give experienced entrepreneurs access to those that are just building their businesses, so that they can also serve as mentors to them and encourage them and advise them on how to build their businesses. Most importantly as well, we believe that you find entrepreneurs who are doing really good things, but at the same time, they don't know how to manage their accounting, they don't know how to deal with the legal issues. And at the very early stage, we don't believe that the best way is to burden them with trying to transfer that knowledge to them. So we have an in-house team, and in some cases, consultants who then provide the services to them. Then we pay these consultants to provide accounting services to them, legal, recruitment, HR support to the guys in our incubation center. And I guess the other is just, I've spoken about the office. Our office is one of the few really modern co-working spaces in Africa, actually. The internet access is also quite good, so we partnered with an internet company that gives us 45 Mbps internet for free. And they've been doing that for the last 5 years as well. So I think the best way to probably continue at this stage will be to share some of the stories of a few of the guys in our portfolio and some of the projects that we've been able to achieve and accomplish from within the Innovation Center. So this one is common. I think in most countries where you have local dialects and languages, you find that modernization is beginning to push the kids away from really just imbibing the American, British culture, speak English, and try to forget everything else. So we have the same in Nigeria, where the growing middle class, their kids are suffering. They can't really speak the local language. They know nothing about the culture. So a team from within our center decided they were going to build animations that will focus on telling the stories and teaching kids the local language. And they were going to do that by putting it on mobile apps and also on tablets, so that the parents can actually download the apps and hand it over to their kids, and the kids can learn the languages in really interesting way. So this was one of the ventures that came into our portfolio at the very early stage. As at the time, I think I used this deck probably 3 months ago. So as of then, they had about 65,000 app downloads, which is on the store. And the interesting thing about this as well is the bulk of this download, which is part of what I said about experimentation. So the bulk of these downloads actually came from Brazil. Brazil, yeah. so when they were building this solution, they were building this solution for kids in Nigeria. But what they didn't know is that there's a language in Nigeria called Yoruba, which is well spoken in Brazil. Because apparently during slave trade, most of the black people in Brazil were taken from West Africa. And they speak this language, their culture is quite close to our culture. And they actually care more about keeping in touch with their roots than even people in Africa. So that's something they've discovered. So the team is now thinking of going on a trip to Brazil, actually, to understand their users better, which is why I think experimentation in social innovation is really, really important, because you don't know what you're going to meet when you're building this solution. So it's an interesting one. Are they very successful? I'm not sure, depending on how you describe success, because 65,000 downloads is probably not the best. But in terms of impact, what they're doing is quite unique, and they're trying to tweak their model as well. So they're thinking of improving the quality of their animation, going into producing for TV as well, because there are kids who still don't have access to tablets, and they can enjoy this on TV. This is another one that is interesting, probably not a problem in the West, but it can also be. So yesterday we had the opening session at the stadium. And I was fascinated when I saw the stadium, because I walked past it earlier and I saw people playing basketball, football, and things like that. And in the UK as well, I've seen that, where in every almost local area, you find what they call the sports centers, which has been built by the government. And I think it's the same in Hong Kong as well. But we don't have that in most cities in Africa. So the government is not invested enough in infrastructure. But the sad thing is that the middle class in Africa is also growing. And access to information means people also know there is the need to stay physically active. People know that they need to exercise. People know that they need to make sure that they do sports. But unfortunately, they don't have the infrastructure to support that. So a team within the hub and myself, so this actually came from my need, because when I was in the UK, I played football every week. When I moved back to Nigeria, I couldn't play football. So we decided we're going to start build an app. And what the app will do is to help you find places where you can do sports first, but beyond that, help you find people you can do sports with. So if I'm coming into Lagos and I want to play football, I don't know where to start, I should be able to find people playing football on the app. And I should be able to find where to play football on the app. I should be able to find people running on the app, and I should be able to join them and run with them. And that's the thinking behind it. And we think this is something that is quite unique to Africa, but at the same time, it's applicable everywhere you go. I'm going to be in Hong Kong for a week. If I'm back home, I run twice or 3 times a week. I'd love to run here, but my first challenge was, where's the best route to run on the island? And when I started asking questions, people said I need to go to the harbor. That would be the best place to run. What if I could find people running in Hong Kong on the harbor, and I just join them and we run together? So that's the concept. But this is more relevant in Africa because the infrastructure is not there. And we believe that this can become the infrastructure for physical activities on the continent.
What are they doing?
They're warming up before a 5K run. So it sounds like you guys. So this started last year. I think now it's about close to 14,000 people on it. It's growing really rapidly as well. It's an exciting platform. This is one of the ones that we're proud of. So this was founded by the lady in the middle. She left Nigeria, went to MIT to study. while she was at MIT, she was thinking of how to return to Nigeria and contribute to moving the society forward. And she thought something that was a major problem is waste disposal. So when people say you take water, people dump their bottle in places where they shouldn't dump. There's no proper recycling system. And when you don't have proper recycling systems, most of the PET bottles and the waste that people consume ends up in the drainage. They block the drainage, and it comes back to haunt the society. So she came up with something that she's called We Cyclers. She's a member of our community, and she decided she was going to do incentive-based recycling, which is simply when you store your waste and you give it to them, they collect it from you, and they give you a point on your mobile phone. And every quarter, you can use the points you can redeem the points as cash, or you can use it to collect household goods. So you can use it to collect cooking pots, or whatever you like. And what they then do with the waste is they recycle the waste and sell the waste to Europe. Which is quite interesting. So they recycle the waste and sell it to Europe. So it's an interesting business. They've been testing for the first 1.5 years. Now they're looking to scale, and I know they're in the process of raising about $1 million to scale the business, which is also exciting. And the good thing about this that we've also seen in a place like Africa is, not just Nigeria, in most African countries, is that because the government and infrastructure is weak, social entrepreneurs can actually build solutions that will then become the social infrastructure for some of these services. So which is where you find that debate around whether social entrepreneurs should be making money or not. It's broad and complex. I don't think the answer to it can be straightforward, because you find people building businesses that are purely solving social problems, but they're making money as well. And how you say whether people shouldn't make money from it or not, I think that's a deeper conversation. But this is another one that we're really, really excited and proud of. Marmalade. So again, people know about women rights, women issues, especially in less developed society, not only in Africa. Again, development, internet is a big issue. Which is why we believe in the use of technology, not necessarily because we think it's sexy and you have to talk about it and use it. Technology democratizes access to information. And the problem with that is that it changes the fabric, the social fabric of every society, because the way people do things simply will change. So you'll find that the young mothers in most cities in Africa, the way they think about motherhood or parenting is different from the way how mothers did. Because simply my mother would take care of me based on what our mom told her. But my wife is not going to do the same thing, because my wife can simply read everything on the internet. And she can use so many people's experiences to reach a conclusion, which is not necessarily bad. It just means they're open to much more information than my own mother. And that was becoming a big problem in Nigeria, where people just feel like, I'm not listening to my mom. What she's telling me to do is not correct. I'm going to do it this way. And you start seeing young moms feeling lonely and feeling disgruntled about things. I'm not just happy about the way it was going. So this lady who used to work for KPMG, which is another interesting thing about the social entrepreneurs that we're seeing in a place like Nigeria, most of them actually have really, really good jobs, and they just decided, I'm not going to look after just myself. I'll drop my career and do something for social good. So she left her KPMG job. She finished from LSE as well in London, and decided to set up a group on Facebook. So she started by setting it up on Facebook, which was really to encourage mothers to come together and talk about issues they face and encourage one another. But right now she's gone ahead to build our own web community, which is doing really good. And it's also moving beyond Nigeria as well. So you have mothers from Kenya, from Ghana, also coming onto the platform to engage one another. So beyond startups, so we've talked about individual projects. This is another exciting thing I'm really, really proud of about the Social Innovation Center that we've set up. So people started seeing the trend that there are young people who are beginning to see technology as a way to build businesses and enable the society. But then the government is not moving at the same pace as these young people are moving. So you have pockets of young people trying to do different things, but the government is not giving them the right support they needed. So internet, for instance, the quality of internet that most entrepreneurs still have access to is quite expensive. It's not the top quality that you expect. So people decided what we're going to do is to start a cluster, which is going to be close to the university in Lagos, which is one of the best universities in Nigeria. They say we're going to all settle down in this same location. And what we're going to do is use our collective power to engage service providers, engage government, and get them to provide us with the infrastructure and the services that we need to be able to do our business better. So CCOB was a major part of that. We actually led the project. And what we did was to go to the government and say, right now, we've got about 15 businesses in this neighborhood. Unfortunately, you do not have what they call the fiber optic cable in the area, and we need it to be there, because without the fiber optic cable, we can't do our business well. And we gave them a projection that this is what's going to happen. If you put fiber optic cable in this area, it's going to attract more businesses into the neighborhood. These businesses will be able to collaborate and use their resources better, which means they'll be able to create jobs and employ more people, and add to the bottom line of the country as well. And we were lucky, so the person in government listened to us. They worked with a private company. They set up the fiber optic cable. And today, there are over 60 businesses after 2 years in the area. Over 60 businesses, just by that action that was led by a group of people. And beyond that as well, what we're not looking to do is to connect the entire neighborhood. So beyond just the businesses, we also want the residentials and the schools and the public institutions in the area to be connected to the internet via this mesh network that we're creating. So another exciting thing that we've done. So I'm almost at the end. We are aware of also the fact that as we get excited about technology, we also need to continue to build the talent. So without talent, there's no way you're going to be able to apply technology smartly. So we started something called Geeks Club. And again, in the way we do things, this is also an experiment as well. So teacher training in Nigeria is not the best of the quality that it should be. So you find that most of the teachers don't even know computer science enough to be able to pass the knowledge across to the kids. So what we've done is to work with a British foundation, the Raspberry Pi Foundation. So they make a credit-sized card computer. And we've built a curriculum on top of the Raspberry Pi. And what we do is we have volunteers, and we have 5 pilot schools. And these volunteers, they go into the school every week to deliver training to the kids on computer appreciation, but also not just computer appreciation. They also then go deep into software writing, but also hardware as well, using the Raspberry Pi. And this has been so successful. It started last year, that now is going to be going into about 25 schools. And the extension that we're seeing with this is that the government can also then use the lessons that we've learned here to begin to think of how do you train teachers to be able to deliver computer science courses within secondary schools. Finally, So as we use technology, as we build solutions, something that is also quite key to what we're seeing is being able to build solutions or create solutions to problems in ways which your target audience will appreciate it is a skill, which the technologists will call user experience. So I may have a really good idea of I'm going to create the next best microphone. But if I don't understand the nitty-gritty details of how the users want to interact with the microphone, I may end up creating a solution that my users will not appreciate. Which is the same thing with the apps we build. It's the same thing with the social problems you solve. It's the same thing with the education programs that you come up with and you try to implement in school. How do you make sure that your target audience can actually appreciate what you use? So we started what we call the UX Lagos, and the focus of the UX Lagos is really about usability and user experience design. So how do you take product development to ensure that usability is a core part whatever you're building. And we're not leaving that to just the for-profit technology businesses. We're saying even as a social entrepreneur, you need to be thinking of your users. How would they want to interact with the solution you're building? Especially in Africa, we think this is quite important because, yeah, technology is sexy. You may see the way it's being used in Europe and try to transplant that to somewhere in Lagos or somewhere in Nairobi, but you may find that the people there are not interested in using it the way you've thought of it. So what we do with this is a group where people meet and they constantly discuss the science of usability. And we think this is core to everything we do because this is what's going to get us to be better as we build solutions for the society. So that's about it from me. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope I've been able to share some of our thinking around social innovation from my part of the world. Thank you.
I will put the speaker back on center stage and pour some water for them. Paul, can you help me as well? Now, can I ask the two speakers to join us for a Q&A? And I think it will be very interesting to see when the Social Enterprise Summit designed this session. Go ahead, drop the mic. When the Social Enterprise Summit designed this session, we would really like to see how many people have been to Nigeria before in this room? No, nobody, right? How many people have been to Scotland? Yes. Glasgow? Good, good. Of course you're in Glasgow. I was in Glasgow, but my master research is actually with the designing company of GTA, of Grand Theft Auto. So I interviewed them in Edinburgh. I love Nigeria team. They play very good football as well. Anyway, the concept behind this session is that we want to find out people from very different part of the world, something you have not been. How did they work together? What are the commonalities that transcend cultures, that transcend geographical areas? If you tell me earlier that your first project is related to Brazil, I would ask you to find the Brazil entrepreneur to come here so that we can have someone from South America, and then Africa, and then Europe, Scotland, and I think Tiffany is here from North America as well. And we're in Hong Kong right now, so it's interesting. We co-work with technology right now. So if anyone has a question, feel free to just raise your hand. Paul will pass you the microphone. But before the first question, maybe I should ask you, both of you has mentioned you have a lot of partners, interesting partners. When you try to co-work with people, what's your normal first step? What's your normal first step to try to find people? You mentioned beg, borrow, right? And then, but how do you, beg may not be the first good word, but how do you first talk to people to co-work with you? When you said Google helped you, but how did they find you? When you approach them without success stories in the very first place, how did you talk to them? How did Karen talk to your first partner? Can we learn about the stories about working with the first partner? Maybe, Bosun, you pass the wireless mic to Karen so that you can use the other one, if you don't mind? Yes. Yes. You can use this one? Yes. Karen, you want to go first?
All right, I'll do that. To be honest, I think, so I mentioned this earlier, when we were starting, I didn't think it was going to be that easy. But in 5 years doing this, I think one thing I've learned is that the social entrepreneurship space is actually a space where there's so much support out there. I know a lot of people think the world we live in is hopeless. But you will find that if you pick a particular cause or issue that you want to address in your society, there are so many other people thinking exactly along the same line as you. some of them may just not have the energy or the bandwidth to work on that social issue, but you find that they will have so much resources that they can put behind you to support you. So the first part for me is always being able to define and ensure that I have a good understanding of who are the stakeholders out there that are thinking along the same line as us. Who are the people out there who feel the pain that we think the society is feeling. So literally saying, define who who's feeling that pain. And in designing who's feeling the pain, you can then identify those that are put. So I'll use Google as a good example. So Google believes that technology should also be in Nigeria, just the way it is in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco. And Google has a team in Nigeria. And Google as a private company cannot get the whole of Nigeria onto the internet. Google as a private company cannot build the local content that is going to make the locals feel like internet is relevant to them. So when we approach Google with their understanding that there's nothing like what we do at all in the market, they know that if they support us and we're successful, their business is going to be successful as well. So it was a no-brainer.
But how did you feel the pain of others? You mentioned feeling the pain. Right? How do you feel the pain of others?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel Google's pain? I mean, Google is so big. Right?
So
they possibly say that I'm painless. Yeah.
I think again. So what's Google's core business? That's the question you need to ask yourself. So they thrive simply on people searching for information. That's what they thrive on. People say searching for information, and up until like 3 years ago, if you look at the top 10 most visited websites in Nigeria, all of them were foreign websites. So if Google was going to thrive on people finding information, and the top information people are looking at are foreign information, the implication of that is that the Google customer base or user base in Nigeria was not going to grow as fast enough because they are not meeting the needs of the local people. So the pain for Google at that point is for entrepreneurs to build local content for local people to consume.
All right. Good. Karen, you mentioned the Commonwealth game being a leverage to promote social enterprises. I find it very interesting because when big events come up, everybody will be basically too busy. And how can you talk to people who said that I'm too busy with the Commonwealth game and you pitch them a new idea and then they go with it? I mean, how can you do that? I mean, you're actually adding more burden to them, right? Is it? Or what's the trick? What's the trick?
I think sometimes if I go on gut, so I think it was probably the year before the games were coming to Glasgow, and I was sitting with Carolyn, who's also here from Scotland, and we were having a coffee, and I said, wouldn't it be great if we could give young people £2,014, because I like gimmicky things, so 2014 games, £2,014, to help them be social entrepreneurs. And then it was like, well, what's stopping us? And I think because if you get excited about your own idea, and if you're passionate about that, then other people will get passionate about it. So when we started talking about, because I think like most big sporting events, like the Olympics when it came to London, and then when Glasgow got the Games, there's all this talk about, okay, so the Games are coming and all this money is going to be spent, but what does it actually do for communities?
Good.
And so we came up with an idea that that was going to involve young people in a really creative way, and I think people by people. So because we were incredibly excited, I think probably very naive as well, with the timescales that we set ourselves, but we just sort of fell into it. I don't think it was a big grand plan.
All right, but that's a good question. I mean, everybody knows that Brazil has just held the last World Cup, right? And there's a huge protest in Brazil about Brazil organizing the World Cup because people are asking, you pour in huge amount of money doing this, but what does the money do for the community? Mm-hmm. So the younger generation in Brazil, actually, I interviewed them when I was in Brazil, actually feel very disappointed about the games because it does not improve their lives. So it will be very interesting to see how Scotland actually used this opportunity to work with the younger generation. But how do you find partners? Going back to my first question, how do you find partners?
I go on gut. Sometimes I think even coming here, I think just confirms that there is so much good stuff going on out there. You know, and I think you're incredibly lucky to have the people who are involved in the organising committee who have gone out there and just found lots of different people, you know, from across the world and brought them here to share their experiences. So with the Beyond the Finish Line example, I came across an organisation. They had a really cool name actually. It was called Ice Cream Architecture. We have these things back in Scotland. They're ice cream vans, so they're vans that go round. And these were architects, and they took themselves round in an ice cream van to communities. So it was quite neat. So I saw a project that they worked on, and I thought, I want to work with them. So I spoke to them and I said, look, I've got an idea. I think we can do this. Can you help me with, you know, the other part?
Okay.
And we just took it from there.
Oh, so you go to the ice cream van and talk to them?
I did actually. They didn't give me any ice cream though.
So go to the place where people actually work. I mean, that's important, right? You go to the school and talk to the students. You go to the different districts in Lagos and talk to the people. So go to the place where people work and talk to them, and don't ask people to come to your place. So great. I think that's a good idea. Any questions at the back? Tiffany has a question. Gentleman over there. Let's do 2 questions at a time. 1, 2, and then we'll go back to your questions. Give them the mic to him first. Hi, you're from?
I'm Alex from, I'm a local university student.
Thank you.
And first of all, thank you for 2 speeches, and it is really inspiring and eye-opening. And I would like to know is that in the speeches, I have heard of so many examples of some social enterprise of co-working. And I would like to know, behind the bright scene of this example, what is the biggest challenge or a barrier for the social enterprise to have co-working and co-creating?
So the difficulties and the barriers to co-work with people. Tiffany.
So my question has to do with narrowing the field, and how do you, I would assume that there are a lot of great ideas out there, and I understand the context in the States for, you know, how everything is made very competitive. But I'm curious about your process for narrowing the field and choosing the best of the best. Is it by committee? Is there, you know, partnership? What is the process for that?
Okay. So screening. Okay. We'll take that 3rd questions later. Any?
A question to...
Oh, can you do it the second round? Sorry. You can have the mic, but let's answer these 2 questions first, and then we'll go back to you. Sorry about that. Bosun? Karen?
So I think the biggest barrier for most social entrepreneurs that we've worked with is putting together a team, especially when you're moving the idea away from an idea into a venture, a running project. Because what you find is you often need talented people to help you run the venture. And as a social entrepreneur, most of the time, you don't have the sort of resources to pay them to do it. So you need to find people who are passionate about what you're doing to join you in making it happen. And in some cases, that may be the case for 1, 2, or 3, or even 4 years before you're able to pay salary or compensate for their time. And most of the time, that's the biggest challenge, especially in a place like Nigeria, where you're competing for talent with bigger organizations who can afford to pay.
I think with our experience with the Beyond the Finish Line co-working space, it actually addressed one of the biggest challenges, and I'll be honest, without us really thinking about it, and it's the fact that we actually gave people that place to test out their ideas. So normally in business startups, you know, you'll maybe be in a room like this and it's lots of people in suits and there's desks. But actually we were working with creatives, and what we had to do was just clear all that out and let them make the space their own and just let the space evolve with them, because actually one of the things that people told us through some of our other programs when they came and visited, and they said this is the kind of support that entrepreneurs need. It's this kind of practical support. We need space because it's too expensive, you know, to go out and rent our own space, and we need a safe space where we can, you know, try out something, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't matter. You know, nothing bad will happen. I think another challenge though is in co-working spaces is you get dominant personalities. So you can get people who might overtake, and then that can be you know, quite off-putting from others. So one of the ways that you get round that is you have somebody there to host that space. And they make everybody feel welcome and make sure that everybody is using it and taking part.
How do you pick the best ideas? Or how do you know this is a better idea?
You don't.
Exactly. Exactly. So for us, I think when we started, experimentation was a big part. We just thought we were going to experiment. But because we had focus on technology as well, so that was already the starting point. You have to be using technology. But again, in hindsight, something that worked for us was we also started with what we call challenges. So our first 6 months was focused on finding good ideas that connect citizens to government. So we call that governance. So all the ideas we were looking at were ideas around how can we use technology to connect citizens to government. And to be honest, the biggest venture in our portfolio came from that. The one that built the app that is popular in Brazil, it came from a challenge that we ran for education. So we did that for a long time. Then eventually we now have what we call the walk-in ideas. So if you have a great ideas, you can come into our social innovation center and say, you know, I'm working on this. Is this something you want to look at? Can you support us? And at that stage, I'm not going to lie to you. We just look at it. We have a team. So there's someone that is responsible for incubation who is meant to be the expert. But you know, at that stage, we just look at it, and if we think it's something that the social challenge you're trying to solve is compelling enough, and we can see that a lot of people will benefit from, we take a risk with it. That's what we do.
Yeah, we've always stuck to 3 simple criteria. The first one is the individual. Do they have the passion, you know, to see this through?
How do you measure that, though?
Well, that's why we meet people. So you won't get that from an application form. So the national programme, the Social Entrepreneurs Fund, which is Scotland-wide, we probably get, you know, hundreds of applications to that every year. We'll do a quick sift, and then we meet everyone, and then we make that decision. And that's very subjective, completely subjective.
That's it. Second one?
The second one is the business potential, and that's when you start to work out, is this person really looking at an enterprise that can generate trading income? So even basic things like, have they thought about who might buy their product? They don't need to have, you know, bought it, but have they actually even thought about who might buy it? And lastly, but not least, is the potential social impact. So we're always looking at potential. So the Social Entrepreneurs Fund is competitive. Probably less than half the applications we receive get funding. You can't pick winners. We have teams of people. In fact, even in Beyond the Finish Line, probably one of the most successful ideas. When I was in the shortlisting panel, I said, we're not putting that through. Magazines never work. These girls are selling a high-end fashion magazine promoting Glasgow's youth culture, fashion culture, globally in every country you know, you can think of, and it just shows you. So yeah.
Can I just make a point? So we have these 3 different processes as well, which we applied. But I think the first one you mentioned is actually a very important one from our experience. Because what you find with most social entrepreneurs is at the start, the the urge to contribute to solving a social problem is always a very good motivation. And 5 years doing this, we've never seen any entrepreneur that starts and becomes successful straight up in 1 year. People need to always stay with it for 1, 2, 3 years. And that ability, that commitment is what sets apart the guys who stay for that long. And those that are successful in our portfolio are the committed ones.
I think to kind of turn the question on its head a little bit though, the beyond the finish line, and also, well, I've got some information with me if anybody's interested. From the Beyond the Finish Line pilot, we are now running a programme called Vital Spark in our rural communities in Scotland. And I think we like to make life difficult for ourselves because apart from the fact that they're really difficult to get to, there are actually areas where there isn't an awful lot of activity happening, but they are areas that have got lots of assets, but they also have lots of problems. So one of the things that Firstport's now doing is not just reacting to the people who will probably set up something anyway, is we're actively going out into communities and trying to listen to the community to find out what is it this community really wants and inspire people to then take action and respond to their own needs. So all we are doing is we're acting as a catalyst.
Go to the place. It's always about going to the place. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Gentleman over there, your question.
James Leung from an NGO serving children and youth.
Welcome,
I think
James.
for over 30 years.
Thank you.
In the past, we social workers always design solution, design activity, design program to serve the kids or the young people with various problems. But this session, we're talking about co-creation. I just, maybe related to just the discussion made, especially to Bosun, your very interesting project ideas. A question, how these projects, the ideas come from, how to co-create with the target clients these projects are going to serve, a process of co-creation. Because I think I have some reflection to our work. In the past, we social worker, NGO, or the government, we believe too much in our profession. We have the expertise to design solutions to serve those disadvantaged or people in trouble. But I increasingly believe that those who are going to deserve always they have their own solution, but we have to facilitate them to design the solution.
James?
So I know how in your project,
James,
how you
the fact that you
engage.
work 30 years in your industry and you start asking this question actually deserve an applause from the audience. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's great. I mean, you see, I mean, people start to think how to co-work and co-create with others. So how to kickstart the process? I think how to kickstart the process.
So that's a good question. So I didn't go into that in my presentation, and also it touches on my answer to Tiffany as well. So the reason we adopted the challenge model is because we wanted the co-creation process in our selection process. So the way we do that is when we throw out a challenge and people submit ideas, we don't just select them. So what we do is we select about 9 of them. So when we did the one for education, for instance, we selected 9 ideas. So we then looked for parents with kids in school. We brought people in from the Ministry of Education. We went into about 5 schools that are close to where the Innovation Center is located, which is in a normal neighborhood, it's not upscale. And we got kids from those schools to also join us. So we used the model of hackathon. Really.
How old are the kids?
Secondary school kids.
Yeah. How do you communicate with them? I always find a hard time to communicate with secondary school kids, you know.
They're interesting. I think what we tend to do with those is not to really talk too much.
Okay. Got it. I'll shut up right now.
No, seriously. I think that's what we did. We just didn't talk too much. We just said, this is what we're looking at. How will you approach it? So what we did with that was we selected the 9 ideas from the education submissions that we received, and we gave them our innovation space for a whole weekend. And we say, we've received these different ideas, build a prototype or a journey of how you see the product working. So it was based on that work that we selected the likes of the guys doing animation. We selected 3 out of the 9. And the solution was done with all these people that we selected from within the community as well. So for us, co-creation is actually a major part of our selection process, which is why we go the challenge approach. We don't just say you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea, even though we're doing that now, but it's not the bulk of how we work. Because we believe that the society and the people you're targeting can actually give you a lot of insight into how the solution should look. So they help us in the selection process of the ideas. That was it.
Karen, anything to add? How to kickstart the co-creation process?
Yeah, I think Bosun's summed it up really well. With our latest programme, Vital Spark, we went out into the communities. I think you've got to, as Vincent said, you have to go out and go into the communities. And I've talked a lot here today, but we didn't do that when we went out. We went out with 2 simple questions. And the first question was, what do you love about your area? And then the second question was, what could be improved? Because everybody always starts with the problem, and let's face it, we are trying to solve problems, but it can put people in that kind of negative and defensive. If you actually get people to start thinking about, you know, what they really love, they start bouncing ideas, you know, off each other. So what we did is we took everything that they said, and when we were designing our publicity materials, we made sure that that was all in there, so that anybody, you know, who was at those sessions picked it up and thought, yeah, they've listened, this is what it's about. But what we used, it's what you were saying about the challenge model, is what the people in the community said. We then developed those into a set of themes and said to people, you know, could you be the vital spark for your community? Do you have an idea that can address these themes? And it worked really, really well.
It's actually very good tips. I mean, first of all, listen more and then react accordingly. And then ask the 2 questions. What do you love the idea? And how can you improve it? Because most of the time when we deal with new ideas, we normally don't ask those 2 questions, right? We normally ask, will other people criticize this new idea? And what are the problems related to the new ideas? We normally ask those 2 questions. Why does it not work? But not why do we love it in the first place? And I think by listening more, we'll understand more what people love and what people doesn't love. I think that's a great, great answer. Anyway, any more questions? We have time for like 2 more? 2 more questions? 2 more questions? If not, oh, there's one more over there. Because I have a questions about how to co-create or stroke co-work with the government. I mean, it's almost like mission impossible to co-work with the government, right? Regardless of which government we are talking about, right? But I would love to learn more about that. But first of all, your questions.
係兩位講者好啊，咁我都係嚟自香港。係啦，咁咧我都係嚟自香港一個社會企業嘅。咁我就想問，因為頭先喺 Scotland 嘅例子就聽到就係話啊，原來咧5間社企有3間做得到，咁有2間咧其實就失敗咗喎。咁其實有冇一啲嘅方法可以幫到嗰2間失敗嘅社企企得住咧？又或者調翻轉嚟問，就係其實嗰2間社企失敗嘅原因係啲乜嘢，以至叫到成為我哋香港今日做社企嘅可以係一個提醒，呢個第一啦。咁第二咧，其實就係 Scotland 好好嘅就係咧，政府其實有撥款有錢嗬。咁我哋香港咧，如果要問香港政府或者社署攞錢去做社企咧，就要有個 funding service agreement 嘅，係啦。咁即係話我哋係要有一啲嘅 output standard 咧，係要量化咗嘅，要俾翻政府。如果唔係咧，咁政府就唔會再繼續俾錢你去做個社企。咁我想問，其實就係 Scotland 係咪都要有一啲嘅嘢要俾翻 Scotland 嘅政府，以至叫到政府先至會繼續去支持社企咧？咁如果唔係嘅話，咁你社企都要營運噶嘛？咁你哋營運嘅時候，咁其實如果你哋冇政府錢嘅時候，咁你哋講唔講 profit 嘅咧？
It's actually an interesting question. You got the whole questions? Yeah, and I think we can extend that to Nigeria. I mean, that's actually related to my last question, right? How to work with the government. The government love to have very solid KPIs, the key performance indices. And in Hong Kong is under the form of an FSA, the Funding Service Agreement. And in social entrepreneurs' term, is always about how to measure impact, right? So how to measure impact and how to translate those impact into bureaucrat speak so that we can fit into the system. And that's the second part of the question. The first question is actually much larger. What are the usual failure elements related to social entrepreneurs? So it's two big questions. Karen, start first this time.
Yeah, in terms of the people, you know, who don't continue on their journey or who fail, it can be for different reasons. Sometimes it is just purely due to personal circumstances. Something's changed in their lives and they've decided not to go ahead. Sometimes people learn that maybe the idea was good, but actually they're not suited to running a business, and that's okay too. Other times it's unexpected outcomes. So, for example, we had one woman who wanted to set up a social enterprise, and she thought that she would get the local government, the local council, to pay for the service. But actually what then happened was the local council ended up just giving her a job and paying her to run it. So she thought, well, it's achieved the same outcome. I think, though, that we probably still don't have enough failures. We probably, you know, that's why we want more people to experiment more and think bigger. Because if we do that, then we're going to achieve social change on a much, much greater scale.
And how to work with the government, we can answer that later. But failures, I mean, how do you address failures faced by social entrepreneurs?
I think failure in social entrepreneurship is an ambiguous issue to deal with. Because I still think it's not the same as failure in for-profit entrepreneurship, because for-profit entrepreneurship, you know why you're going into it, and most of the time for a lot of people is to make money, even though you still have value to bring to the table. But for social entrepreneurship, you'll find that the real social entrepreneurs are motivated to do what they want to do because they feel passionate about the fact that they can contribute to making their society a better place. And I think something we don't often talk about is the weight of that on people's shoulders. You know, the feeling that, you know, I'm that messiah in my community and I'm going to go out there and help them make their life better. That's actually really heavy. It's a very big thing for a lot of people to carry. So you find that different people at different stages in their social entrepreneurship life may find that it's becoming too much. I can't handle it anymore, and they'll step back. And the best thing to do is not to try and push them in that direction, which is why I still think commitment is the biggest success factor in social entrepreneurship. At times, it's not even the quality of your idea, because if the idea is not working well, you can always tweak it, as long as it's to solve social problems. But if you're not committed, if you don't have that power to go through that heavy burden, it's difficult. And I think, you know, at times it's best to just let it be when people fail.
Working with the government, how to talk to them about the impact you're making and let them understand?
Yeah, be very visible. I think Firstport, for probably the first, I don't know, maybe 4 years, we've been going about 8 years, we were completely under the radar, completely invisible.
4 years? Under the radar?
Yeah.
How can you survive?
Yeah, well, we were surviving because we were, I think, doing what most enterprises that are led by a women, and we were just getting on with doing the doing. I'm joking. You know, we were doing good work. The people who knew about our work knew it was good. And it wasn't until I had a meeting with the Deputy First Minister, the person you saw in the photo, and he said to me, he said, you need to be much more in our face. He says, you're doing great work. He says, but be louder about it. So after that, I decided to focus less on, not less, but you know, I knew operationally we could deliver good programs, but actually what we did was we really smartened up our marketing activities. We started using social media a lot more. We started introducing videos and just, you know, playing about with the images of the people that we worked with, and that worked well. So I think we're lucky in Scotland. We do have a very supportive government. I mean, the Hong Kong population, I think, is it 7 million?
7 million.
Yeah, so you're not, I mean, you're just obviously bigger than Scotland. Scotland's 5 million. Compared to the UK as a whole, the population's somewhere between 50 and 60 million. So government at a UK level feels very distant. And, you know, you're quite disconnected, but whereas in Scotland, you feel very connected, it's very accessible. Most people working in the third sector will probably have met the government ministers. But I'm going to put Carolyn in the spot, I'm not going to ask her to speak. But actually, Carolyn is the head of policy for an organisation that's called the Big Lottery Fund.
Yep.
And they were set up by government, well actually they were set up because we have a national lottery, so you pay £1 and you cross your fingers and you hope you're going to win, you know, your millions and millions of pounds. But out of every pound that you spend in the lottery, some of that is taken, the government takes it, and then what they've done is they've put it into a body like the Big Lottery Fund, who then distributes that to charities, and it's been really successful because I think over the course of best part of 20 years, we're talking billions of UK pounds. And actually, I think another reason that social enterprise has flourished in Scotland is because we do have an organisation like the Big Lottery Fund that actually has allowed us to experiment. So the Big Lottery Fund is the funder who took the chance on Firstport and allowed us to run beyond the finish line. And they were also the funder who had the foresight to put the contract out to develop an accelerator.
Yes, still, but we have the lottery fund without the big. But it's quite huge, actually.
Yeah.
But bureaucrat, I'm all for working with the government, first of all. But bureaucrat, by nature, is risk averse, right? How do you encourage them to do more risk taking?
So actually, we're quite popular for this in Nigeria. People are surprised how we're able to do a lot of work with the government. We're so successful with it. I was called to the Clinton Global Initiative to talk about this sometimes earlier this year. So again, it may not be the same with Scotland because the reality in a place like Nigeria is different. Bureaucracy is a big one, which is, I guess, is common anywhere. Corruption is another thing, because you may find in places like that, politicians may not want to be part of projects that will not get.
So it will actually make them more risk averse.
They may, but you know what we've discovered again is that most politicians, at the end of this day, still want something good for their community.
Yep.
They have so many interests to balance that they struggle to be able to balance that, and they may not support you. And I think that's where what I've been saying about experimentation within social innovation space is key. So what we've tend to do, and we've done a lot of projects this way, I can give a few examples. So what we've tend to do with our work when we need to work with government is we look at a foundation, like a foundation within the society. You may find that HSBC, for instance, here would have a corporate social responsibility fund. Maybe within that fund, they have something to support the people in the lower class to be more educated. That's just an example. So what we tend to do is when we have ideas like that, we create a prototype of the idea, something small, and we get a foundation like that to support the idea. And what we then do is that prototype will give us the opportunity to collect real data on the likely impact of our project to demonstrate to the government that if we do this, it's going to work. Because I think what we tend not to do within the social innovation space is because we're doing the work for social good, we expect the government to understand it, even without hard fact backing up our approach. Forgetting that they have the way they're doing it before, which they believe is the right way. So in some cases, you actually need to show them that what you're talking about is going to work, and that's what we've done a lot of, which is why we keep saying experimentation within social innovation is key. Do small, show that it's going to work, show results, show some of the challenges, and you'll find bigger organizations like government supporting you.
Karen?
I think, yeah.
But that's a good model. I mean, it's kind of like prototyping. Yeah, it's basically prototyping using foundation money and then do scalability with government and public funding. Yeah.
And I think probably the same is true in Scotland in terms of the way that we're trying to go in terms of scaling social enterprise at a different level. I think you have to go in at all levels. You have to go in and, at the politician level, but then you also have to, I think, build your networks within government and across departments as well. So although we sit within the Communities Directorate, I've also now made sure that the people working in the mainstream enterprise, which is a completely different department, know about the work of social entrepreneurship. And I think, as Bosun said, yes, sometimes they'll ask for reports, so give them the reports. And in the same way that you would listen to communities, also listen to them, because they are people too. Yep. They've just, they have a job to be done, and actually if you can try and talk their language to them and make them, or help them to understand it, then it will if it makes their life easier, then they're going to like that. But I think just be visible and go in at all levels.
I think I would round up this session with this question. All the projects that Bosun has presented to us today are technology related. And Karen, you also told us in one of your tips that virtual co-working is also co-working. It will work too. How do you use technology when you design your solution and when you co-create something, when you co-work with people? How does technology comes to mind? You start off with a particular solution, or how do you design, or how do you input the technology factor in when designing a solution? How does it actually work? What's the thinking process? Bosun, all your projects, basically.
So I think something we're aware of, and again, if you know Africa, this is important. It's not to get carried away by the technology itself. So the technology is not the core focus. At the end of the day, if you focus too much on technology, you actually end up excluding people. That's what you get. So where we often start from is the problem itself and the people you're trying to reach. What's that problem you're trying to solve? How will the people you're trying to reach consume it? And is there an opportunity for technology to disrupt that channel of consumption? That's what we've seen. But in some cases, we've also reached the conclusion that there are projects you do that is going to exclude people. But in the process of excluding people, it's going to end up including them. So a good example is during elections, for instance. You find young people who come up with really interesting ways of using infographics, using social media to engage people on why you need to vote. And in a place like Nigeria, if you do that, there are so many people that are not connected. So the argument will be, if you focus on that, you're already excluding some people. Yep. But the argument for it is, if you focus on it and you engage me, who I'm on social media, in my family, I'm probably the most educated, as for example. If you get me to understand why I need to vote, I'm going to become your evangelist, and I'm going to go down into my community and also engage with people. So we can't necessarily look at the downside of technology and then say it's not useful. So it's about applying it smartly and knowing that it's not the end goal.
So you're talking to the change agents, and the change agent actually has a ripple
especially effect in Africa, where we have tons of issues.
Interesting.
We need to start from somewhere, no matter how small.
Karen also said using the social media smartly and to create an impact.
Yeah, I think though what Bosun said was, though you don't necessarily start with the technology, so we always put people at the centre and bring them together, and then the connections that they make, I think the best thing is if they choose to maintain those connections themselves. So through the Launch Me Accelerator, because people are spread across Scotland, they're now connecting with each other through Twitter. And we don't have control over that, and that's great. And I think when you were talking about elections, I can't come all the way to Hong Kong and not talk about the Scottish referendum. But actually that was a really great example of how technology just completely changed the landscape, because what we have, you have a very traditional media, and actually it was quite frustrating because quite often they weren't necessarily reporting what was going on at the grassroots and on the ground. But actually what took over was this amazing social media campaign and activity. and it made politics fun and light-hearted. So normally when you pick up the papers and there was a headline of the politician and it was, whatever it was going to be, actually in social media, people picked that up and played with it and turned it into, something funny, and nobody could control that, and that's what everyone, and I just thought that was fantastic. So I think technology, again, is, it's an enabler.
Well, technology as an enabler, and technology can transcend cultures and countries, and which also help us to co-create together. And with that note, I would like to present our souvenirs to our two speakers today. Let us put a very big hand to Bosun and Karen. Thank you. Thank you. For those who have signed up the business luncheon of HSBC, it just started. Please turn right on the door and follow the path to the last room, to the final room, 421. And I'll see you in